friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters. Chapters is a show on Armstrong television that presents stories about authors, editors, and publishers in the tri-state region. Sometimes we reach a little farther afield, but we're right here at home today, and we're delighted to be back in person with our guest today, Rexanna Ross Shumaker. Rexanna Ross Shumaker is a retired hairdresser and former owner of Hair Today Incorporated. She's also a retired mental health counselor and holds a master's degree in mental health counseling from Marshall University. She's worked in many areas of the mental health community, and she's a certified neuro-linguistic programmer and has a credit in clinical pastoral education from Cabell Huntington Hospital. As part of her training for working with people with disabilities, she's also a certified Low literacy teacher. Her memoir, Daughter of Life's Longing, is her first book. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
One question pops up right in my mind is, how'd you get to be from a hairdresser to a clinical psychologist?
Well, I had grown up thinking or knowing that I would go to college. That was a goal in our house. You know, you had to leave, you had to go to college, you had to do something with your life. And I did go to college for 3 days out of high school, and I didn't like it. I knew I did not have the professional background. I mean, the education system where I came from was horrible, and I knew I was wasting my time and my mom and dad's time. And I had friends down here going to beauty school, and actually I thought being a hairdresser was probably the second worst profession on the face of the earth. But I came down here, went to school, loved it. After about 15 years, I decided I needed to get out of it, but I stayed another 10 years, but it just kind of happened. And then after I was widowed at 37, I thought, you know, there's got to be more to my life than this. So I started school. I went part-time for a while, and then I thought, oh God, I'll be paying my student loan back with my Social Security check if I don't pick up the pace. So I did that, and when I got it was like February, and I was to graduate in May, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I don't want to go to work. I'm going to do my master's degree. So I stayed, and my goal was to finish a 60-hour master's degree. I was going to finish it before the year 2000. To do that, I quit my job, and I took 18 hours a semester, and Dr. Dean Deutsch told me I was crazy, but he gave me permission to do it. I finished a 60-hour master's degree and a 900-hour internship in 20 months. Wow. And I got out just under 2000. So it took me a while, but it was, once I got in it and I picked up the pace, I loved it, and I didn't want to stop. And if they'd had a PhD program, I think, that I could have fit into, I would have stayed. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could have been a professional student. I loved it that much.
Yeah, I did too when I was in college. I loved going to school.
But that was then, and this is now.
Well, all right, so that is not what you've covered in your book. I want to hear what drove you to write this book. Some of the things in here are just pure tragedy. That's all there is to it. But you came out with an attitude that says, you know, those things are not going to get me down. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that story and how you came to write it down.
All my life I've said, as a hairdresser, I was going to write a tell-all book. And it would have to have a brown paper cover on it, like the old Penthouse magazines used to have. And through the years, it kind of turned into one thing to another. And then after I was widowed, you know, that changed my life drastically. And then I thought, well, you know, my mother-in-law wanted to write a book too, and we were going to take this life writing class. But life happens, and, you know, things don't turn out the way you want. So finally, I did take the writing class. But what started all of the actual deciding it was going to be a book was my mother died, and I wrote her eulogy, and I wrote her obituary, and I got such good positive feedback from everybody on what a good job I had done with that. And they said, well, you're a talented writer. So then when I got into that class, it just kind of escalated, and then I thought, who in the world has been through all the stuff I've been through on a regular basis? You just don't know people. You know, even my friends, after they read the book, you know, it's easy to say, I've been in 3 car accidents. Well, big deal. But until you read about it and you know how it all happened, then that's totally different. And I have always been a survivor. I'm tough. I'm resilient. And if something happens to me, okay, it happened. I can't do anything to change it except to live through it. And I was bound and determined that none of this would ever get me down.
That's fantastic. Did you ever consider that people were, what people would think? I mean, even those who maybe knew you but didn't know all the details, how they would feel about this? Did you think it might change what they thought of you when you read all these things? Or when they read your book, because it's such an intimate picture of your life.
No, because I really don't care if people know me, they know me. And I think if you make a judgment call on this book, that's your problem, not mine. And one preacher read it, and he goes, "How did you learn how to write like that? Did you learn that in that writing class, to be so frank?" And I said, "Have you never had a conversation with me before?" I mean, I just think I didn't tell everything. Stephen King's book on writing says tell the story, but don't tell all the story. I mean, I could have added things to that book that would have brought you to your knees. But I think I told enough of it that I think it told a pretty powerful story. And, and if you make some kind of an assumption, that's your problem, not mine.
Tell us a little bit about the story. People, enough to let them know what it's about, so that they will then want to read all of the details.
Well, I came from a very impoverished, ungodly little place where people were determined not to help you, but to put you down. And my mom and dad had the forethought and were such wonderful people. They wanted us to leave that area. They wanted us to go to school and have better lives than they had. I left, came to Huntington. I'd been here almost a year, and I was going home for Christmas, and I was in the first car accident. I was in the hospital 3 months. It took me almost a year to recover from that. And then less than a year later, I was in the second car accident. And it took even longer to recover. And I was pregnant and lost a child during all of that. Then 10 years later, coming back from my class reunion, I was in another accident. We lost a house. The mountain gave way. We lost that. We almost lost another house. And then the ultimate tragedy was being widowed at 38 or 37, 38, whatever it was. And it was like in a 17-year period of being married, we had 8 tragedies that Holmes and Ray's scale of stress says that any 2 of them would have finished a couple off. And we just kept plodding along. And there's a lot of stuff about my relatives that people they're amazed when they read some of the things that are in the book. But, I just tell it like it is. And there's a lot of humor in the book, but there's a lot of tragedy. And I think it tells a story of resilience.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And there is a lot of humor. That's good. I like that. When you first, you said one of the first things you wrote was your mother's eulogy and obituary, but hadn't you written technical stuff, things like that?
Oh yeah, I did that at work when I was going to college. And if a professor gave us free hand and free will to write whatever we wanted to write about, when we were in the counseling program, we could write about anything we wanted that was related to that. And so I just kind of took that as a way to write about my life story, and the professors were blown out of the water by some of the stuff. And I kept all those papers because they would write, "I don't believe all this happened," and it just turned out to be a story.
Had you been a journal writer, or did you start off and just write it as you went?
I'm just the world's worst for writing stuff down. I kept journals for a few years. Most of what I wrote all the years that I was going to college, and that kind of sparked a little bit of something in me too. But when I read a book, I write in it. I write on the margins, I make notes, I underline things, and if it's a book that I really love, I'll go back and read it 2 or 3 times, and I do that to see how my ideas have changed and how I have grown as a human being. I bought a book after my husband died, and it was one of Billy Graham's books. And I went through and underlined it, and I let everybody I knew that had been a widow read that book, and I made them sign it and put what they thought of the book in it. So that's one of my favorite books, and I go back to it often. But I also learned something in that book, that when something bad happens to us, the first thing that we say is, oh, why me? You know, this pity thing. And in this book, Billy Graham says, when the thing that we should say to ourselves is, why not me? Why am I any better than somebody else? Why should a tragedy happen to you instead of me? And I think that kind of helped my attitude a little bit. So, and you got to find something that's concrete to help you get through all these kinds of things.
So you took Patrick Grace's life writing class. What pitfalls did you find in going through writing this book, and when you finally made a decision that you were going to write it? Maybe something, you know, somebody out there that's watching would think, well, I've always thought I'd write my own memoirs. What do I need to be looking out for in trying to do that?
Be honest. Be upfront about it. Tell the story like it is. Don't embellish it. Don't put things in it that didn't happen. Don't try to make it glamorous. And it's like I told John Patrick Grace, you can't write a book like mine and embellish it. There's no way. I mean, you can't add
embellished enough.
Yeah, you can't add frills to it. You can't make it something that it's not, you know. Enjoy what you're doing. But, you know, write a while, put it down, go back, read it again, and say, be honest, do I want to put this in here? And I did that, and there was things I took out of that book because there was still a couple of people living who could be hurt by knowing the real truth about some things. And I can't do that to people. You know, no, even if it did happen, that's okay. You know, I can't do that to other people.
Yeah, I think that's important, that you have to know, you know, what is it they say, whether it's honest, whether it's hurtful, whether or not you should put it in.
Yeah,
you know.
And I tell them, you know, do it for yourself first. Write it. If you want to publish it, you know, do that. But if it's a goal, do it. Don't wake up some morning and find yourself an old person wishing that you had turned over something, you know, done something with it. But don't wake up and find yourself in that position.
Right. Did you have a memoir that you sort of modeled after, or any that you read before you started writing that you thought,
oh heavens,
this is maybe the way I should do it?
No. I looked at my life and I thought, what do I want people to know? And I wanted them to know about the accidents and everything, and how I pulled myself out of it, and how successful I really have been. And I did it my way, and I did it on my own. There was nobody helped me with anything. And I think I wanted people to know that it wasn't just those accidents that made me who I am. All the stories about my relationships with my grandparents, my cousins, how we grew up, the people around us that tried to destroy us. But it just kind of took on a life of its own.
So you were working full-time when you started writing this?
No. I was retired.
You were retired, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so did you have a specific writing routine, and did you set deadlines for yourself? Or did the class help you with deadlines?
No, because I'm very structured. I'm extremely anal when it comes to things like this. And I would go out and work outside in my garden, my flowers and stuff, and do my outside work, and then I'd come in and then I'd write in the afternoons for 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes I'd get up in the middle of the night because something would be in my head and I'd have to go write it. But once I saw a pattern, I saw a flow to it, then I just kept on it and I picked up the pace. And it just kind of just morphed into what it is.
Did you outline it?
Yeah. Well, Patrick has an outline that he gave us in the class, and I've told everybody, whatever you do, use that, because every subject I came up on that I wanted people to know about, I would title that page whatever that subject was, and then I wrote down all the things I wanted people to know. And I have a whole big notebook, and after I got through, I would mark an X through it. So It was an outline, yeah, sort of. But I tell all the students, especially when I did his Zoom class the other night, I told them use that, you know, because it's invaluable. It keeps you on the. It maps out a path for you. You can see where you've been and where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. And I think it gives you encouragement that you've accomplished X number of pages or X number of words, or you've got that chapter done, now I'm moving on to the next one, so it feels like you're making progress towards your goal.
Yeah, and I actually left 2 chapters out of my book, and then when you read it and we talked about it, then I went ahead and threw them in there, and I don't know if that was a good thing or not, but, you know, it was, I wasn't real sure people would want to know those things, but, you know, I put them in there, so it's there.
Well, I thought it was a good book. I was
thank
pleased.
you.
So you said you read and you underline and you do a lot of note-taking in your books. Are you an avid reader?
I don't read as much as I'd like to, but I read. I grab up the newspaper and I'm through that thing in 20 minutes, and then I grab a magazine, I read it, and then I'll do a crossword puzzle, and then I'll look up something on the internet that I've seen and read about it, and then, you know, it just morphs. It goes from one thing to another, and you just keep finding things to read.
Do you have a favorite author?
Stephen King.
Yeah.
He's crazy. I love his work, but that book on writing, I think, is a real invaluable tool for anybody that's starting out.
Did you read other books about writing?
There was a couple others, but none of them impressed me to the point that I can even tell you what they were. And Patrick, you know, suggested that we buy them. But I think Stephen King's book, and it really, I think the thing that fascinated me about that book on writing, he was talking about when he was in the accident, when the car hit him, and he described how his memory, it's gone when something like that happens. There's only little bits of it that you remember. And he described how he remembered all that stuff the same exact way that I detailed mine. And I thought, oh my gosh, people are going to think I plagiarized all this stuff. But I didn't. And I was really fascinated by reading about what had happened to him and the correlation of what head injuries do to you and all that kind of stuff.
There's a book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, and that's a good book too, on writing.
Okay.
The name comes from something her father told her when she was a child. She had to write, had a project to do, and then she was supposed to talk about the migrating patterns and the nesting patterns and all this sort of thing about a bunch of birds. And she said, I don't know where to start, and he said, simple. Take it bird by bird and do it.
Now, I'm sorry, but I lied. My favorite author, second author, would be Stephen King. The first one is Khalil Gibran in his book The Prophet, which is where the name of that came from.
Is it?
Yeah, and somebody gave me that book when I was like 27. I didn't know who he was. I hadn't been to college. I didn't know anything about that. And that book, to me, is like reading the Bible. And I have several of his books, but
tell us how the title relates to your life, Daughter of Life's Longing.
Because I long to get out of that place. I long to have a better life. I just wanted away from that place. I wanted to be me. I wanted to find something better than what was where I lived. And essentially, I guess I was that person that he talked about. That we are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself, you know, and I got to get out of here.
Yeah, that's great. That's super. Do you think books do or should serve some sort of a teaching moment or a moral purpose? And do you feel like your book could help other people who go through life's tragedies?
Oh, yeah. One of my best friends, her mother has struggled her whole life with problems and issues and how to deal with things. And when she started reading my book, about every other day she would call her daughter and she'd say, oh, this book was written for me, this book was written for me. And I've had several people tell me that, you know, it was an inspiration to them, that it has caused them to look at things in their own lives a little bit differently.
That's great. Good for you. Do you think books can bring you closer to another person, or maybe make you walk in someone else's shoes?
Oh yeah, and I think a lot of people that have read my book see me in a different light. They knew me, but they didn't, and they knew that all these things had happened. But one of my best friends, she said it was like somebody punched her in the gut when she read my book, and she said she saw me in a different light after that. So,
that's interesting. Do you remember the first sort of adult book that you ever read when you were growing up? Because I can remember, for me, I remember I had an aunt who was an English teacher and one who was a librarian, so obviously books were in my life from the beginning of time. But the first adult book I think I ever read was called Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. And then from there I went to something like Gone with the Wind or whatever.
Well,
and I just wondered if,
Gone with the Wind probably was one of the first ones. But my youngest sister's only 3.5 years older than me, and she would come home in the summer from college and bring all her books. And one summer I read everything that John Steinbeck had ever written. And I read books, I didn't have a clue what I was reading. I mean, that was way over my head. But, you know, and even in high school, when I had a chance to write a story about something, I would write about something John Steinbeck had written. And finally, in high school, I got the name of Mrs. Steinbeck. So, but, I mean, I loved these books. I just, you know, he's kind of like the one that wrote the fish story, Hemingway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like him too. He was very
Have
good.
your reading tastes changed over time?
Probably not a whole lot, because I like books that tell a story, that give you purpose, that you learn something from, that you learn life stories from, that give you hope or courage, or that you learn something from.
Well, you sound like you read a whole lot of fiction. Have you ever considered writing fiction?
I did start a story a few years ago. It takes place in a nursing home. My husband found it, and he says, well, what's all the significance of this or that? But it starts out with me being old and being in a nursing home, and every night I get in my wheelchair and I go down the hallway, and the lights are all off, and, you know, just the little dim lights. And the nurses don't bother me because they know this is something I need to do every night. And I go down this hallway, and I always stop at this one door and I look in. But it's who's in that room, and I mean, it's if I'd ever finish it kind of is based on what I think will happen to Charlie and me when we get old.
Charlie being your husband.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I may finish it, I may not. So.
Well, if you didn't write that, you said when we first sat down, we were just chatting, that somebody said this story wasn't finished. Do you have any intention of writing a sequel to that?
I would do a book and call it The 5 Other Stories, My Brothers and Sisters, and because the age difference, I went to first grade when my oldest sister went away to college, and there's like 2 years between all of us. So the age grade difference between us, we all had very different experiences. And even though we remember the same incident because of their age difference, they know things about it that I didn't know. So one brother read it, and he said I had done a good job, but I only touched the surface on how things were back home, how bad it was. So if I would, it would be called The 5 Other Stories. And it would be their side of it, and it probably would have to have a brown paperback cover on it. So, or either I'd get shot. So
yeah,
but,
right. Tell us how we can get your books.
Well, right now,
your book.
The Red Caboose has it, and the Inner Geek has it. So we're working on putting it on Goodreads, Amazon, a few other places. So, but. You know, people can contact me, and if they're local, I'll deliver it to them. Or, yeah, I mean, you know, and I can mail it, whatever people want. So I mailed a lot to out-of-town people. So, yeah. But you know, they can call me or whatever.
That's super. Rexanna, thank you so much for being with us today. I think we're about out of time. We want to thank you for coming, and also thank the Huntington Convention and Visitors Bureau for allowing us to be here on the patio, providing us with some on-site support. And we encourage people to come to the Red Caboose on Wednesday when they begin to open again, finally, and pick up a copy of Rexanna's book, and let you know that other authors who have been on chapters or will be soon have their books at the Red Caboose as well. And that'll do it for today. Please come again next time, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Connect with Chapters through email. Write to lp4@zoominternet.net. Chapters has a Facebook page at Armstrong Chapters. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. All Chapters episodes are available on YouTube. Visit the Armstrong Neighborhood channel on YouTube and look for a playlist of all the Chapters programs.